Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Who's Afraid of Mobile Capture? I'm Teresa Resick, the Director of Webinars here at Aiim, and Aiim is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Aiim President John Mancini, Jaspar Roos of XL Families, and Giulio Battistini of CumulusPro. SpeakGraph and CumulusPro are the sponsors of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we get started, I just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the bottom of your screen in the Resources tab. Feel free to ask questions throughout the hour using the Ask a Question feature. We will hold these questions until the end, where we'll have about 5 minutes or so to answer them. But you can also use this feature to comment or ask for technical assistance. At the end of the webinar, we'd greatly appreciate it if you take a brief survey, tell us how we did today, and offer that feedback, and then also to suggest future topics for us to cover. The link to that survey is also in the Resources tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will remind you again at the end of the webinar about this. But if you just click that link, it will open in a new window, and then you can just take that survey after the webinar is over with. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIM.org's Webinars On Demand library in just a few days. Right now, I just want to take a few moments to introduce our featured speakers today. Just have a group of really good gentlemen here with some good things to say. And first up, we're going to hear from John Mancini. And John is an author and a speaker and the respected leader of Aiim's global community of information professionals. As an author and a frequent keynote speaker, John offers his expertise on digital transformation and the struggle to overcome information chaos. He blogs under the title Digital Landfill. And we also have with us Jaspar Roos, and Jaspar is a renowned authority in the field of innovation. He's been the Chief Inspiration Officer for ABN AMRO Bank for many years, and he's also co-founder and Chief Inspiration Officer at XL Family, an international incubator and accelerator with stakes in many different initiatives, from impact startups to new innovation tooling. And according to Financial Times, he's one of the people to watch in 2015. And then we also have with us from CumulusPro, Giulio Battistini, who's their CEO and founder. And Giulio is a globetrotter with an adventurous palate, and he brings that same boldness to the way he approaches his professional life. He joined DICOM when it was just an IT startup in Switzerland, where he quickly progressed into key management roles. And under his tutelage, the DICOM Group, which is now Kofax, became a leader in business process automation. And a few years later, and after a move to Singapore, Giulio founded CumulusPro. So right now I'm going to turn things over to John Mancini to begin talking about mobile capture. John?
Thank you very much, Teresa. I really enjoy the opportunity to be here. I am the warm-up act for everyone today. I have to give everybody, I hope this isn't a spoiler alert for Jaspar and Giulio, but they have slides that actually have cats on them, and so you will really get a charge out of this, I think, as we get into this presentation. So what I thought I would do is just lay out a little bit the 50,000-foot view of content management and how it's changing, if you will. So the first thing I wanted to just focus on is the idea that this concept of managing people, processes, and information is not a new one. You know, we have done this before. We've been through multiple migrations in this area before, and so when you think about this, we started with paper, and we started with documents. We then moved into micrographics, which was basically a way of treating paper in a different kind of way. We sold ERP systems then. We moved into the C-suite in terms of trying to sell systems at a higher level in organizations, but paper was still really at the core of how documents were processed within ERP systems. About the time I came to Aiim, document management and workflow came into the arena, and I think the thing that was most notable there is that we really focused on mission-critical document-intensive processes and how to automate those. And now in the last 10, 15 years, we've been in this era that we call ECM, or Enterprise Content Management, and that has been an era in which we've gradually seen the shift from a focus on document specialists to a focus on knowledge workers within organizations. So as you think about all of that, we're in the process of yet another change right now. And I like to say that there are three major disruptors that are driving this transition point that we're in right now. And so when you think about these, the first one is consumerization. And it's not just a question of devices, but it's really a question of what users expect from their applications, how we deliver those applications. You know, the cards have really changed hands in the last couple of years, in which, you know, we're now in an era of user-centric IT, and that really points to the importance of mobile capture moving forward, because that's really where an awful lot of this is going to ultimately occur. Second big disruptor everybody's dealing with is cloud and mobile, and I usually put these things together rather than separate, because I think what they are mutually reinforcing disruptors. You know, when we make progress on cloud, then it tends to drive mobile and vice versa. And, you know, this is a really interesting point, because it really touches on this notion of work that can be done, you know, anywhere, anytime, on any device. We interact with employees in ways that we never would have thought of 5 or 10 years ago. And our customers are basically being brought into the business in ways that they never were before. You kind of take it from there and think a little bit about this in terms of the third disruptor, which I put this under the category of the Internet of Things. You could put a lot of different labels on this, but it basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that the question of scale and the question of the velocity of information and the question of the variety of information types that come into our organization that need to be captured, all of that is changing under our feet, changing dramatically and in a geometric rate of change rather than an arithmetic one. So as you think through this, I think what it says about this thing that we have called Enterprise Content Management, or ECM, that it really is morphing in the directions that are on the slide here. You know, I don't think we really quite know where it will wind up, and I'm not trying to say that ECM is irrelevant, don't get me wrong on that, but what I am saying is that it is morphing, it is changing, it is becoming part of the puzzle rather than the puzzle itself. And I think as we think about our systems, as we think about how we deal with these changes, clearly mobile capture is a big, big part of how ECM ultimately is changing moving forward. So I think we're in this sixth era. I think mobile's at the heart of this transition. I don't think we know what that transition looks like. I think the challenge when you move into a new era is that things change really, really dramatically. And when things change really, really dramatically, best practices are hard to find. Labels are really hard to find. And so when you think about where we've been, I think in terms of ECM and why it's in the process of changing, this is a data point from our most recent survey, our ECM Decisions survey, and you can get that on the Aiim website for free. But this point really dovetails extremely well with that consumerization trend that I talked about and with that mobile trend that I talked about. Because in many current systems, in many past deployments, usability is still an issue. And the reason that's important is that if we don't really think about this question of usability moving forward, in an era in which people have much more power to deploy systems than they ever did before, they can pretty much do it at the click of a button and then charge it to their expense accounts. You know, we've really got to think about this question of usability and mobility much more strategically than we have in the past. So I think this usability thing, as I say, centers around mobility, the reason that we've had problems with this. And there's just 3 data points that I wanted to highlight from our surveys that talk a little bit about this question of mobility and mobile capture. And so the first one is mobile access. And this, again, is from our ECM Decisions survey that we released about 2 weeks ago. And you can see here, although 29% of the people that we surveyed in the process of rolling out mobile access, only 39% currently do so. And so clearly, mobile is a problem for many, many implementations out there. And if mobile is a problem, then ultimately it means that usability is the problem. Second issue, I think, to touch on, again, ties to usability itself. When we asked a variety of questions about mobile usability in that survey, for example, 55% when talking about their ECM system said that they have no app-based capability. Well, if you have no app-based capability, that means your capability on the screen is ultimately, probably a 2-point font version of a full-page website, which means that you don't really have mobility on your ECM system. When you think about this question of social platforms, that becomes something that is really complicated moving forward. And I think the core thing that reveals that we still have a lot of work to do in this regard is when we asked people who have deployed ECM systems what the role was that was played by file shares moving forward, 62% still said that they were strongly reliant on their file shares. This is perhaps one of the most discouraging numbers, I think, in the survey, because it says to me that we still have a long way to go, and the challenges are accelerating given those three disruptors that I talked about earlier. I think the last piece is this question of capture. And so, and there's a lot of dimensions to this. I'll talk about this in a second, but capture is kind of a funny word because some people have a very narrow-cast interpretation of capture. I tend to view this in a very expansive kind of way. So, capture is not just the question of sticking a piece of paper into a scanner and then scanning it. It's the question of when you think of all the different information inputs out there, how do you develop a strategy to deal with those in a coherent way, in a consistent way, in a way that that tracks what's actually going on? And so capture, even though a lot of people think of this as like the meat and potatoes and maybe the foundational blocks of a content management system, it's way more than that, I think, right now. It becomes something that's really critically, strategically important to get right, and it is particularly important to get it right in a mobile context. So the last thing, when I think about advice that I give to people about their ECM strategy moving forward, there's really basically three things that come to mind. The first is that, from a usability perspective, mobile needs to be considered first rather than an afterthought. As I mentioned earlier, I've seen far too many ECM implementations that have a bolt-on mobile capability that really isn't very elegant compared to what people can get in most consumer-grade systems. Second point is that we have an opportunity, given that everybody is walking around with not only scanners but data capture devices in their pockets right now, to push capture much more close to the point of origination, and that's a great thing. That's something we always struggle with in this industry. And then the third thing I urge people to think about, as I mentioned earlier, is remember that capture is more than scanning. In some ways, I almost think we need a new word, but this is an industry that's laden with jargon, and so I'll resist the temptation to come up with a new word. We just need to think about capture in a much broader, much more encompassing, much more strategic, and much more mobile context. So, without further ado, I will hand off to Jaspar. As you guys think about content management moving forward, I'd like you to think about these two questions as these guys talk through some of the issues that they've encountered along the way. I think our central challenge is to help people figure out in our organizations where they put their stuff so that it's secure and shareable and searchable, and that's an organizational goal. But that's not enough these days, and this is where mobility comes into the equation, is that the way that the systems that we provide to people have to work the way that they do and work in a way that's useful to them in getting their job done. Because in a consumer era, if you don't do that, people will end run us. So, without further ado, let me turn this over to Jaspar, who has some awesome slides. I think you'll really, really enjoy them. If you have any questions along the way, please post them using the button. And I will say, Jaspar, just in handing off to you, that you have the best title, I think, that I've seen, and I might think about stealing this in my own organization. So take it away, Jaspar.
Well, copying is allowed, John. So this is Amsterdam calling. Welcome everybody. And I also would like to dive a bit deeper into the world of trends and what it does to us, and to give you one or two examples from the outside world of the capture market and a document capture market, and to see what implications it might have for the financial services. So I'm based in Amsterdam, just like a small backup of who I am. I'm part of a lot of organizations and advisory board from the EU Commission to being a professor in Mexico. And so my company is now called Excel Family. It's a group of around 100 people all over the world, in which we indeed innovate and incubate new initiatives to disrupt businesses. And it's not document capturing, so no worries on that. Before that, I've been a banker for close to 15 years, and so the last 7 years before that, indeed, is my role as the Chief Inspiration Officer of Aiim Webinar. I had to lead the corporate venturing group, in which we developed, for example, the first smartwatch or wearable in the world back then. So I'm interested in trends and why the world is changing, because when I was a banker, in the beginning we had to define ways how to finance and how to help companies grow that all of a sudden came to the market, and that took landslide victories in profits, and we didn't understand that. So mainly based on financial and economical stats, we couldn't decipher that. So we started to look at what is happening actually in the world, and so we had to take into account a lot of extra trends, and those go very well, I guess, with the trends of the ones that John mentioned: consumerization, cloud and mobile, and IoT. Because I just remember the good old days, like 20 years somewhat back, so where everything was still fine, paper-driven. Then last couple of years we've seen with the rise of new phones, new apps, new services, that the world is changing around us. The world is changing, people are behaving differently. People are using also phones differently. Of course, selfie was the big word from last year, and so interesting to see is like, what's next? So what's next? How will consumers drive businesses and change their business models? And of course we don't know, but we have some insights in that. And so what we see is that that's not only happening in the consumer world. So we see trends happening, of course, in the political field, geopolitical field, that organizations or countries are changing, cities are becoming more predominant. Of course, I didn't want to add a FIFA slide in this, so I just took Greece, but I think the same is, so that our perception of what is good and bad, that's changing. It has an effect on the things that we do. And of course, it has been accelerated much more by technology. So technology is really a dominant factor right now in the market around us. So remember the floppy disk drive, as this image shows. That drive has been in the family for years, sentimental value. And what kind of sick mind takes people floppy disk drives? So this is like something that we've come so accustomed to technology, whether it's kids or anybody else. So just check out the stats from Ericsson from yesterday night. I took this from TechCrunch.com. 6.1 billion smartphone users expected. And this is like a big rise. So from now in 5 years' time, it will at least triple the amount of phones. It's an expectation of the amount of phones. It's incredible. So how the mobile, cloud and mobile application will drive future trends. And of course, it has an effect on many other things. For example, this is an overview from The Economist. And so what's happening in the people's roles? So what is, again, what will change in the closed-by world? So, for example, one of them is word processing typist. So the probability is 81% that they will change or that they will lose their jobs. Telemarketers, same things, like most likely that they will be gone in 20 years' time. And so we see change in the marketplace, and therefore also processes will change as well. And again, it has an effect on people. People are now, of course, focused on like having availability to internet all the time. and that's one of the most critical factors when you book a holiday, for example. And so we have to cope with that. We have to cope with that. We have to see how people are changing their behavior. That's what they define, for example, as happiness. For those WhatsApp users around the world, is this actually what's happening in a lot of people, in the minds of people? So what makes them happy when they use a product? What makes them happy when they look at the company? Because companies, this is a stat describing that expected in the coming years that the lifespan of an S&P 500 company will have diminished from 65 to 15 years. So it's really innovate or die. It's really, so make sure that you understand the big disruptors, consumerization, cloud, mobile, IoT. If you're not, you'll be out of the game in a couple of years' time. And so we have to accept that, and we have to understand that. So I just would like to give you like an outside example. This is Uber. I guess a lot of you guys and girls will know this company. So they launched in 2011, and they decided to hail a cab in a different way. So before Uber, this was launched in San Francisco, you had to wait 15, 20, 30 minutes to get a cab, if you were lucky. So you probably had to go to an hotel, to a restaurant, order one, and then just order your dessert. So luckily when you were done, then the taxi would arrive. So when they launched in 2011, they totally flipped the model, focused on consumerization, and so they promised like an 80% chance of a taxi coming close to you within 10 minutes. And 94% sure that it would show up in 15 minutes. So there was a tremendous change in the business model, and a lot of people flocked to Uber in doing this. So 3 years forwarding, you see that they have improved. They have improved, raising the bar all the time, and they have gone up in the chance that a taxi will be there within 10 minutes to 94%. Can you imagine, from 80 to 94%, and or 97%, sorry, and even within 15 minutes, it had become like 99.5%. The funny thing is that they also started to investigate patience. So the patience of people, because people got accustomed to this product, and they were interested, like, so are they becoming more happy? Actually, another thing happens. So the longer Uber has been a city, the less people are willing to wait for a car. And this is an interesting fact, because so what you see is that the patience has been shifting. The patience has been shifting. The people are less willing to wait for legacy IT. They have been less wanting to just to be there, because they now want to have everything on the highest level of quality. And this is not only San Francisco. San Francisco, of course, is a busy and a fast-growing city. This happens in a lot of cities. Actually, in all the cities, they have the same kind of pattern. So once a new technology has been adopted by the crowd, then companies just have to raise the bar all the time. Have to raise the bar to get going. And so this is like also explained by a model from Clayton Christensen, in which it says that usually startups or new entrants come in with a new technological model, and that the existing companies who are actually there, they're mostly focused on sustaining their innovation, sustaining their market, and when new entrants create a disruption, like Uber has done, we're using the phone, we're using cloud technology, consumerization, and in the end, a lot of those win. Because they can come up from a lower level of chance of succeeding, and in the end they will succeed. It's a really interesting phenomenon to experience. And if, for example, take the fintech market, I could have taken any market, you see so many companies are entering those markets, because a lot of those new entrants see that the old behemoths in those organizations are just decaying. They're just too slow to innovate. And so we know all this, and we know some of those big examples who are not going to even shift the market. Apple, of course, is a famous example. so they can dominate the market, not even their own. Imagine the music industry. There's now a big fight going on between Spotify, Tidal, and of course the iTunes market, in which Apple is now forcing, maybe with goodwill, forcing the music industry to go to their level. And so this is an interesting thing that raising the bar by the technology and people perspective is happening. And so how to cope with that? Because if you're an existing party in the market, that might be difficult.
And here we are at the start of the first event of the afternoon, the second semi-final of the 100 yards for people with no sense of direction. I'll just give you the competitors. Lane 1, Skolomoski of Poland. Lane 2, Zarapatik of France. Lane 3, Grobovich of the United States. Next to him, Drabble of Trinidad. Next to him, Fernandez of Spain. And in the outside lane, Borman of Brazil.
So this is actually happening in a lot of markets, and people are trying to understand, so how can we create a new kind of strategy to work with that? And so in the end it's difficult, so what to choose and how to do that. So because a lot of examples have been there in the market that hasn't been successful in being able to adopt to the new kind of markets. So we want to talk about banks. So I've been into banking for 15 years and in all different kind of roles. And what we see, there's a lot of buzz around banking because it's a big market and the world needs banking, but who needs banks in the end? And that's a question that a lot of customers nowadays ask, because big disruptors coming on. So why would you stick to a bank? What would you do why would you keep on working for a bank? And organizations like banks have been there for many years, and they have a lot of processes that are very elaborate and very large processes. And they have, in the end, a lot of those banks have suffered from the fact that they have not been focusing on clients anymore. They have been focusing on their processes. They've been focusing on sustaining their market share instead of looking into what the customer really wants. So if you would now summarize the big challenge, it is speed. So just imagine the speed of payments. So when you would transfer money from the UK to, for example, Zimbabwe, it would take you at least 2 to 3 days to get the money over there. Yet now new entrants like Ripple, partly focused or based upon the Bitcoin protocols, who can deliver that in 2 seconds. 2 seconds, not 3 days anymore, 2 seconds. And they have to deal with it because they have created new kind of technologies, and so they have decided to use models from, for example, the document capture market, and they have gone away with all the old paperwork. They've gone away with old legacy systems, and they have totally reorganized the processes that happened in a financial organization. Because this is one of the big issues within financial organizations. There are so many control structures. Everybody needs to have a say. And everybody needs to have paperwork. And the new entrants say, just yank out all the staples and paper clips. And just get it in a fully different way happening so that we can really create speed. So my question is, if you would become the CEO of a bank today, what would you do? And that's a question we've been discussing a lot lately. And so, and we have to go back to examples like from Uber. So what would you do? And so one of the things that, of course, comes to mind directly is that we have to create a new kind of process inside the organization. We need to focus more on consumers. So that whether it's mobile, very likely it's mobile, but it doesn't matter whether you're then in the UK, the US, or the Netherlands. So it should be a very much more simplistic process that people can use. And so again, what's happening right now is that banks have a low acceptance rate because banks are slow. So imagine that you have to ask for a loan, so that takes days. Or if not weeks, depending on the country you're in. You have to deliver all the paperwork, you have to deliver all the items, and so we have to find a way to speed it up. And so mortgage and loan applications, imagine a bank in which you can have this delivered to you in 1 day. Or internally for organizations, a credit review, so every client get a credit review on a yearly or monthly basis. that all takes time. Imagine as well when you have an issue with your insurance and you want to send over an insurance claim. So now you have to enter 3 forms. Why not doing it via mobile capturing? Or imagine compliance. Compliance is very dominant due to all the scandals and a lot of the things that went wrong in the market. So what could you do to make an organization that everybody understands compliance? That you don't read in the newspaper anymore that banks get fined for not having the compliance in place. And to me the answer is using technology from document capture. And when we're able to do so, when banks are able to do so, they will be more accepted and they will be able to use the mobile capture techniques and creating better products and services for their clients. And so in that way they can also play a feature role, like maybe the new Apple, into the market. So having said that, so I'd like to give the floor to Giulio and ask him to take it on into the new market.
So thanks, Jasper. I think Jasper just spoke about speed. John earlier spoke about the 3 interrupters: consumerization, cloud, and mobile. And I think these are the perfect topics for CumulusPro, because CumulusPro, when we started our organization 2 years ago, that was really the vision that we built. We realized that over time organizations will lose their strong position towards customers or even their own employees by dictating what and how a customer or an employee should actually process documents or information in an organization. What we've seen is that the consumer is getting the upper hand in this process. The consumer decides who he engages with, how he activates, or how he self-service his documents and his processes using mobile devices or browsers. So basically that consumerization that John talked about is what we saw happening. The organizations, on the other hand, are trying to catch up with this change in the market and the shift of power, and that would mean that they have to build cloud-based solutions, so to become more agile and to provide collaboration and communication and more interaction with their customers. So that is the perfect environment for mobile capture, which obviously is the topic this afternoon. What I would like to show you is that there is no need to be afraid of mobile capture. When we built our solutions, we focused on that. On one side we have an organization, be that a bank or insurance. On the other side you have employees or customers, and what they want to do is now use the mobile devices to digitize these documents and get them into a process which is hopefully not just a one-way process, but becomes an interaction between the customer and the organization. Now, why do we actually need a mobile capture app? We probably think that all of our mobile devices do have cameras that allow us to digitize documents. Now, it's unfortunately not that straightforward. Here we see some real-life documents that we have worked with in this project that I'm going to talk about in a second. Documents that have been captured by consumers who are not thinking of the fact that as an organization you would like to automate the processing of such a document. So incomplete documents or images that are tilted or blurred are obviously very difficult to process, and even if you just use it for archival purposes, when you retrieve that later on, you may have a challenge to read the content of these documents, which defeats the purpose of digitizing it in the first place. Now, what I would like to show in this short section of the webinar is that we actually built mobile capture applications that guide the user to take a perfect image of the document, which then serves as the basis for further processing in an organization. This sort of customer engagement, as Jasper just mentioned, is obviously very prevalent in the banking environment, but you could think of any environment where you have invoices, cash receipts, tax documents, contract. In an insurance, obviously the claim submission that Jasper just mentioned, big topic, and the case study that I'm going to talk about centers around that. So the case that we are having a look at here is a case with a health insurance. Health insurance obviously deals with its customers who generate documents to be processed. Very often these documents are processed by a service provider. And as long as this is all paper-based, there are long-standing processes that have been working very well between these three parties. And now that the customers are using mobile devices to snap the pictures and do not send the paper anymore, it becomes a challenge because it's a very uncontrolled environment. So the consumer just uses his mobile device, uses his camera, and then the result is file types that cannot be processed, or very large files, because obviously the images taken with a camera are pictures, and you can quickly have 2-3 megabytes per page, which increases the costs of the service provider and insurance when they have to resort to manual processing rather than automated processing of such documents. Now, with a solution that we've implemented there, the CumulusPro Mobile Capture solution, we've given them a platform, an environment where we control how the mobile device does snap the images. It's a centralized control where you set the expectations to the device, what the device will deliver to you. The user interface of the device is intuitive, so that the consumer, even if he doesn't know how to snap a perfect image, we guide him and create that perfect image every time that he actually works with it. Now, the benefit of that is that on one side you do give the user the feeling that you do empower him. He gets the self-service experience that he has in almost anything that is related to mobile and the internet these days. He books his travels himself, he books his hotels himself. Here we allow him to decide when and how he digitizes documents and exchanges them with health insurance. A quick view how that actually looks like. We've taken a video of the app. You will see how the user identifies himself on the app. The mobile app will then snap the image provided the video runs. Here we go. So the user identifies himself against the insurance so that we know who he is. He has the ability to snap the image. We measure the distance, the angle, and the size of the document so that we can later process it, and then we snap that image automatically without the user having to have anything to do with it. There is potentially some metadata which can be added, like a contract number, so that we can easily identify that user when the document is on the platform. All of this is happening without any training to the user. Really consumerization of a process which otherwise would be quite tedious. The next one, just to show you how you can actually make that interface more valuable to the user. So this is an app where we have an existing app of an organization, and we just add the capture capability underneath. Again, ensuring that in this app we generate a perfect image so that this then can be processed for payments in this particular case on the platform in a second step. So a very easy way, and always ensuring that the user doesn't have to have any training and still gets the process done as quickly and as easily as possible. Now, what you have seen just now are two options really. What you can do if you want to get started, and I think that is my main point. What I said, there's no need to be afraid. Apps are available out of the box. The first one that you have seen from DocCare is a standard app out of the box, can be customized with own logo and colors. The second one has used our SDK, so building the capture capabilities into the app that they already had. Both of that is available and allows you to get started right away. We believe we are the pretty much best option out there at the moment. We understand apps and capture. We have been in the capture market for 20 over years. We have been able to combine that. The solution is very quick to value. You don't have to build anything. You don't have to buy licenses. You basically get started and start using the application. I will show you in the next slide that it's not just the mobile app. There's a whole framework to it to integrate that with your existing environment, which allows us to deploy much faster than if you have to build something from scratch. Generally speaking, we think we're a step ahead. We've just implemented the same kind of app with responsive websites. So if an organization just want to have a browser-based user interface and not an app, we've just done that. Even that is possible. It can be done quite easily. The next slide is a slide on the architecture to show you that it is more than just the app. Here we have the organization, the consumer with his mobile device, the internet in between, the environment of the bank with its web server and its authentication server, the environment from CumulusPro where we connect the mobile device to the environment of the bank that allows the user to log on to the bank. So all the user credentials are from the bank. Nothing is on CumulusPro side. Once the user is authenticated, the device gets a token. After this token, the administration information like what document type and so on will be loaded on the phone dynamically every time you load it. The image will be taken, the metadata fields will be added in, the image will be uploaded with that token to the organization, and the organization can then verify whether this user was allowed to generate this image and upload this image in the first place. So that whole framework is ready to go and can be tested quite easily and integrated in your environment quite easily. Now, what we have seen so far is the mobile capture solution. John mentioned that obviously mobile capture is not the solution to everything. You do have people out there who want to communicate with an organization using their browser environment, potentially using the scanner or multifunction devices which they have at home in their environment. So we connect that in the same way like the mobile app. And for the organizations, we built a business process platform in between, which is cloud-based, which allows the extraction, classification, validation, and approval workflows of the documents that are being generated by the customers or employees on the mobile apps or via the scanners and multifunction devices. So it's a complete solution in the end that allows for multi-channel capture of documents and the necessary processing and the interaction between the organization and its consumers or employees. So in the case of this particular province, whilst they started out with the mobile device, in the second step we did bring the browser-based capture so that the consumers can use their scanners and multifunction devices, as well as the import functionality from other repositories like an Evernote or a Dropbox where they have already generated images electronically and then want to add them to a particular process. This is basically what we do at CumulusPro. We connect consumers to organizations with our customer engagement solution. We just simply want to simplify how businesses engage and interact with consumers, because we do believe that the consumers have this desire to collaborate with an organization and do not just want to feel left out and just as a small part of a process. They really want to be engaging with the organizations. The whole focus is on the simplification, the consumerization that John mentioned in the beginning. It has to be simple and it has to empower the user so that they really want to use the engagement anytime, anywhere, and with any device. If you want to go this route, I think it is important that you do look at new players in the market, like a CumulusPro, and not necessarily established players. Quite often they have legacy environments where they can't move into new areas fast enough. That is, again, a slide that I think Jaspar talked to very nicely. If you come in as an interrupter, you do have the chance to move much faster. So we do have number of wins in Europe, in Asia, and slowly also in the US with our solutions, simply because we are providing something more innovative than what existing players do have, and that leads to faster turnarounds for you when you're trying to implement some of these solutions. As an organization, as I mentioned, we are only about 2 years old, 2.5 years. The organization has a lot of experience. We do come out of the capture market. We've been in that for over 20 years. We've built now a network of partners as well as our own offices across Asia, Europe, and including partners now in the US. So I think you can see that we would be an interesting partner for you to talk to if you're planning to move ahead with mobile capture or multi-channel capture and cloud-based extraction and classification. All right, that is a quick overview to, again, hopefully encourage you to talk to us. There's no need to be afraid of mobile capture. We are moving fast in that direction, and we are obviously very happy to share our experience with you and help you to move forward. John,
Great.
That would be my part, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Giulio. Appreciate it, and Jaspar as well. Very terrific presentations, both. As we tee up some of the questions, we do have some questions lined up. You can use the question button to submit more, and we'll get to as many of them as we can during the course of the remaining 15 minutes here. But I just wanted to point out a little bit of information about the SpeedGraph network. You have that up here, and you can get a kind of sense of who these folks are, one of our sponsors. And then you can also get a sense of some contact information for the people on the presentation today. You can also download the presentation. So a lot of the stuff that was covered here, there were some really great data points in the presentations. You can always download the presentation and get access to that. So I have a couple questions. If I could just start down the path and maybe tee those up a little bit. And the first one comes in for you, Jaspar, and this basically has to do with somebody asking whether there are, all the kinds of innovative ideas that you had with regards, particularly to the financial services industry, and is there any particular part of the world, region of the world that is further along the curve than the others? Any particular outstanding areas you wanted to highlight?
Well, first, to rephrase the question, so one of the less outstanding ones is, for example, the market for requests for proposals, or requests for information. Those kind of things, for example, happening in the asset management industry. That's a wonderful world to disrupt and to implement document capturing systems, because there's really a lot of trees that get killed by just doing the paperwork that way. And so mobile capturing in that market would be a great opportunity. So having said that, so you see several markets that are really advancing. For example, the African market, Kenya, the famous example of M-Pesa, in which people start to use phones, and not only trading money, but also trading time and trading like products by trading money and products. And so that's a really that's an interesting market.
I think there's one here for Giulio, which gets to this point of processing images from mobile cameras, and in terms of using the kind of application that you're talking about. Do you have any sense of cost savings associated with that?
Certainly, when you're looking at processing them automatically with traditional technology that we would be familiar in this industry, like an OCR or an ICR engine, in some instances you can't process them at all because the quality is just simply not good enough, and or the file types that you get cannot be processed by those engines at all. So you do have to put in conversion technologies in between, and you can imagine, and that can be different from country to country, but automated processing versus manual processing, I guess we all can understand what sort of cost savings you get out of that. And it's really that bad in some instances. In this particular case, the service provider was on the verge of negotiating a new agreement with the insurance, because they went from highly automated processing on paper to no processing at all on those images that came in from mobile devices, and that obviously was a major cost factor for them.
I think just as we were talking on the screen a little while ago was the a capture toolkit that Aiim has put together to kind of walk people through some of these issues. So if you have an interest in that, then listeners can. There it is on the screen again. You can easily get that. So I would highlight that. Just a follow-up question from somebody, Giulio, on this whole question of mobile capture. The person just said, could you talk a little bit more, again, about this question of image quality, and just maybe some pointers that people ought to look to so that they don't wind up with big JPEGs that aren't really usable?
Yeah, so the way we handle that is, first and foremost, we want to get the best quality possible of the image by guiding the user automatically to get a perfect image. So once you have the image, the way we snap it with our mobile app, there is no additional de-skewing or anything that you need to do, because we guide the user to take the best angle and snap the image automatically, and then convert it to the file that we want, because we set centrally whether we want a conversion to a TIFF file or to a PDF before the image gets then uploaded and processed either in the organization's platform or in our platform. So these are all settings that have to play together, which we have built and tested now in many projects, so that you get the perfect processing efficiency out of those documents that you snap. And it is something that you have to do automatically, because the consumers are simply not aware of the challenges that they create for a back-end system by just, snapping images totally uncontrolled. So it is something where you have to bring that consumerization forward and guide them without them knowing that they've been guided.
Yeah, exactly. I think that latter point, very important. You have to make it transparent to them, because otherwise they won't do it. And it's an interesting point, because it kind of ties with what I was talking about earlier in terms of capture being much more than just grabbing an image. If you're going to actually take the data off of the image in order to really capture the information and not just the image, you've got to have a decent image to start with. So your point is, I think, very well founded.
Yeah, maybe, John, another thing that we have added in as part of the solution is the ability to ask the consumer for a metadata field. If any insurance customer out there sends you a claim, if you're trying to figure out what contract or what policy number this claim belongs to, you're going to have to go through the images and actually find that, right? But if you ask the consumer on his device to just type me your contract or policy number, and he expects obviously that he's going to get the money faster if he does that, so he will do that. And then centrally we get information that allows us to associate that document to his account and makes it even more productive and faster to figure out what exactly the communication is with this customer. And so those combinations are really very helpful.
Good, thank you. There's another question here about, we talked a lot about financial services. Are there other industries that you all see as being early adopters of mobile capture? Either one, either Jaspar or Giulio, whichever one, or both.
Because Giulio is better equipped for that.
Yeah, let me have a try on that. I think it is absolutely clear that the financial services insurances are a perfect environment for that, but a market that we have seen emerging very quickly over the last 12 months is anything that has to do with accounting and tax consultants that are quite often dealing with small organizations who buy their services to do the monthly accounting, the monthly statements for them, or do the tax returns for them. And very often, on a monthly basis, they shift a lot of documents between the company and the tax consultant or the accounting firm. Yet, that all could actually be digitized quite easily and be part of a automated process where the organization uses scanners and multifunction devices with a browser scan client which self-configures and is easy to use, or the mobile app, and then sends these images to the tax consultant for him to work on without having to shift any paper. And that is a market that we've seen very quickly emerging over the last 12 months.
Thank you. Very interesting. Here's a question from somebody. You both talked about speed and the velocity of business, and this person somewhat laments that their implementation cycles are often measured in years rather than months. And any advice, any perspectives, anything that you'd like to share with them about how you create organizations and systems that can adapt at the kind of speed you're talking about?
Well, at least I would say open up your organization, let outsiders come in, look at outside of your industry examples, at least for learning perspectives. I guess that's really important. So I guess that's those would be my 3 simple cases. And the other one is like projects usually take a long time because they are put so big. So I guess like what you see with CumulusPro, for me as an outsider, they offer a lot of like small pivots as well. That makes it really interesting to experiment with that. To experiment that people get a feeling that it can be that you can start with this pretty quickly.
Giulio, you have a take on that? I was impressed with what you were talking about in terms of the speed with which people deploy your solution.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing is that people give this speed more and more emphasis. So I think these old-style waterfall kind of projects where, we take the requirements of the customer, go off in a dark room, and 4 months later come back with the solution and figure out that things have moved on and actually we've missed the target. I think that time is over. On the other hand, organizations, from my meetings, I feel they're more willing these days to accept best practices, rather than having everything customized to the last, centimeter for their organization. So they kind of look at it and say, well, what's my benefit of, getting it totally customized for me, and I may lose a business opportunity because my competitors are moving faster with a certain offering or with a certain process that they work on, versus I take the best practices, which covers 80% of what I need to do, and let's get going and improve along the way. And I think that's the whole idea when you go into a cloud environment, that you develop your solutions in an agile process. So you do something, you see what's the reaction by the customers, you can react to the positive and negative feedback that you get, and you improve along the way. So you do not, I think deferred efficiency is worse. So you want to get started quickly and then see how can you improve that along the way.
I think that's really good counsel. I think about this in the context of my own organization. This is something that we wrestle with all the time at Aiim, even in a small organization, is that it always seems like we're trying to solve the last 10% rather than the easy 80 or 90%, and then iterate. And I think at scale that becomes really particularly challenging. So let's start to wrap up. We're just about out of time, and maybe we'll have just 20, 30 seconds of final thoughts from first from Jaspar and then from Giulio, and then we'll wrap up. So anything that any observations you want to share in closing, Jaspar?
Well, I guess for me, it's like the document capturing system is much more than only technology. It's much more also about this technology and people perspective. I guess if you take that into account, then there will be a lot of opportunity over there.
And then, Giulio, any perspectives that you might have?
Yeah, I think the question that we just got kind of showed that the people are actually thinking this direction and see how they can innovate. And I think this is one of the area where I'm always amazed when I talk to Jaspar about, this innovative approach to old problems. And I think we just have to try to kind of move forward and not just think we've always done it like that, but really take an innovative approach and potentially even take the help of, Jaspar or Aiim to actually have a workshop and see what innovation can you bring to the business that helps you gain and retain new business.
Well, thank you all very much. I think one thing I just wanted to highlight is that all three of us will be at the Aiim Forum in London on the 24th of June. We would love to meet some of the listeners on this call, so please register for that event. It's a free event, and stop by and get a little bit of basic education on this. Also, there's a survey at the end of this in terms of the webinar itself. Please let us know how this webinar served your needs. And then lastly, we do webinars usually about one a week, and so make sure that you look for some of the ones that are coming up in the future. I guess the last piece that I'll just mention, I think that we're at a particularly challenging time, particularly when it comes to explaining to the management of organizations the benefits of cloud and mobile. I think people understand mobile, but there's still a lot of challenge in terms of explaining cloud to people, mainly because very few people actually understand it. So I think that's one of the central challenges of Aiim and of organizations like ours. So if we can help in that regard, please don't hesitate to ask. It's why we're in existence in the first place. So we hope to see you on the next webinar. Jaspar and Giulio, thank you so much for your insights. I really appreciate it. And
you're welcome.
And for Aiim, this is John Mancini. We'll be signing off, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you.